So some of the growing challenges that we have, from our experience and having, again, the audience of entities, companies that we've, been elbow to elbow with in forensic analysis, incident response, proactive security has included insurance companies, government entities, private practices in terms of dental, obviously the hospitals and healthcare providers. And one common challenge we have right now under the pandemic is users that have elevated privileges. So that is, a major challenge for IT because, you have this influx of calls from 5, 10, 15, 20 users that say, I can't do this. And you have IT somewhere in the country or somewhere in the state trying to provide ground support. And they might be tempted to say, you know what, let me just enable the privileges so that you can do what you can focus on doing what you're doing. Maybe you need to install a plugin for, again, one of those cloud service providers. Their software might not work as well in Chrome, but works pretty good in Mozilla as an example. And maybe there's a plugin component with it. So there's the challenges with user rights, right? Privileges being elevated. And that's a very bad thing. Because if you do happen to get phished or you do happen to be a victim of drive-by download, you want to make sure that the malware that does get executed doesn't run under the elevated security context of how your user is provisioned. Another major challenge is patching. Patch management gets a lot worse under the pandemic with remote force work because now you don't have centralized patch management servers that can easily touch upon, the endpoints. Different time zones, potentially. You have different networks, obviously, and you might not have the necessary technology like agents to be able to phone home and say, oh, let me get the latest batch of patches for my system. And so it becomes more complicated. The software landscape also becomes more complicated as, we have a greater dependency. We just saw in the earlier slides, more cloud, which means more web-related technologies. A lot of these cloud solutions now have you log in and it says, do you want to enable desktop notifications? And so a lot of these things might require some types of embedded software, might require some capabilities by your browser, and the hackers and cyber criminals know this. So the browser, which is on the endpoint, becomes yet another challenge. The other challenge that you didn't have when you were actually on premises in a centralized environment is actually the single user at their cubicle, at their desk working, and no one else is typically using their endpoint. But now you might have, the spouse, or the, domestic partner or the child, the children basically leveraging, the computer that stays on, someone wants to pull up maybe Amazon and could do some quick shopping. And so you have these realistic scenarios which makes security a bigger challenge when it comes to a remote workforce. Last but not least is the hosting of the networks. You're talking about networks which, you could have router software, you could have network software that is highly vulnerable. It might be already compromised. So you're talking about a mobile asset that's going into a very, potentially hostile network environment, and there's no validation, there's no assurance of whether or not that network can be trusted. Nonetheless, that device is basically neighboring to a lot of different things. Your IoT devices, your printer, your toaster that's internet enabled, anything.